This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Trade and commerce delegates for the U.S. and China meet this week in Washington. This after President Obama met with Pacific Rim leaders in Peru to discuss the future of the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, an especially hot-button issue this presidential election. President-elect Trump has vowed to kill the deal and has threatened to retaliate against China, which he's labeled a currency manipulator, leading to concerns Trump could spark a trade war. President Obama alluded to that at the APEC summit.
When it comes to trade, I believe that the answer is not to pull back or try to erect barriers to trade, given our integrated economies and global supply chains that would hurt us all, but rather the answer is to do trade right, making sure that it has strong labor standards, strong environmental standards.
Joining us now for more is Brookings Institute Vice President of Governance Studies, Daryl West in Washington. Also with us from Hong Kong, our Bloomberg News reporter, Lulu Chen, and our guest host for the hour, David Kirkpatrick in New York. Now, of course, still a lot of uncertainty about which campaign promises President-elect Trump will actually keep, but he has just released a video message in which he addressed a few of these issues, including the TPP. Let's take a listen to what he had to say just moments ago about trade.
On trade, I am going to issue our notification of intent to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a potential disaster for our country. Instead, we will negotiate fair bilateral trade deals that bring jobs and industry back onto American shores.
All right, there you have it. Daryl, I'll start with you. What's your reaction to that?
Well, he's doing exactly what he said he was going to do in the campaign, which is pull out of the TPP. And so this is going to create enormous problems for our allies in that region. And it also creates a great opening for China. At the recent conference, China basically is trying to exploit this possible move by the United States to tell the countries in that region, we will create a free trade zone with you.
Now, we've got some numbers showing just how much is at stake in the U.S.-China relationship. The U.S. importing $480 billion worth of goods from China, exporting $150 billion worth of goods. Lulu, you obviously are on the ground with the leaders of Chinese businesses. What is the reaction within China? What are business leaders saying?
Chinese tech companies care a lot about how Trump's policies will be. Now, you might be wondering how this would affect the companies that are largest. Just counting from the top, Alibaba has said essentially that if Trump wants to create more jobs, and they are assuming that that is a priority for Trump, then they will need to work with Chinese companies like Alibaba that are investing in the U.S. and also trying to acquire more products from the U.S. as Chinese consumers upgrade, moving to Baidu. They said that if Silicon Valley is trying to bar immigrant workers in the future, China is more than happy to take those workers as China needs to create its own technology boom going forward.
President-elect Trump, in this latest video message, also continuing, it seems, to support the promises he made on visas and immigration, saying on immigration, I will direct the Department of Labor to investigate all abuses of visa programs that undercut the American worker. David, we're starting to see some potential policy intentions take shape here. What do you make of it?
Well, a very smart global business leader once said to me that there's a global battle underway for influence between China and the United States, and every country around the world is looking at the two systems, one very top-down and autocratic, one democratic and highly capitalist, and to see which one gets the best benefit for its people. And, I think, unfortunately, a lot of Trump's proposals don't factor in the global impact of his actions on that battle. And I think, as Daryl and others have been explaining, the possibility is really great that China really may gain the advantage based on some short-sighted actions that we're about to take. Now, in terms of the impact on tech companies, I think there are going to be positives and negatives. It's very interesting to hear Lulu talk about how the Chinese companies think they could benefit, though, I have to admit.
That is interesting indeed. Daryl, how likely is an actual trade war? In the traditional sense of the word, Trump's advisors have said China's interactions with the United States have effectively added up to an undeclared trade war. How would this be different?
I think it would be devastating if the United States did start a trade war. You know, Trump has talked about imposing tariffs on goods coming in from China because, as you point out, he has accused that country of manipulating its currency. If he were to do something like that, we can guarantee there will be retaliation from China. And then the risk is that this whole infrastructure that has supported globalization over the last few decades is just going to fall apart. And it becomes a catastrophe for many different countries.
So, Lulu, what companies in particular, and let's focus on China, what companies in particular would feel the effects of this the most?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, Alibaba is really focusing on expanding globally currently. U.S. is one of its core targets. And so for them to go into the U.S. in the future, they need to procure products. They are targeting U.S. customers in the future, and Trump policies could potentially affect them. Tencent, their core business, not so much, but in areas that they'd like to expand in, for example, Hollywood movies, that is an area that would likely affect them if they want to buy more Hollywood studios, and we're already starting to see a pushback there.
Daryl, you know, a lot of folks I've been talking to have said, you know, the bottom line is that Trump is a businessman, and he recognizes, or he will recognize, that the relationship between China and the United States is very important. Do you think that ultimately we'll see a softening of the rhetoric and a softening of the actual policies put into place, or do you believe he will take as hard a line as he says he will?
I would hope that there would be a softening just as he starts to realize what some of the negative economic consequences are going to be. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States just because of the cost differentials. You know, it's much cheaper to produce those products in China. But the thing that I worry about is when you look even at his initial administration appointments, he has appointed real hardliners to some of the key positions. And so that suggests, at least off the bat, he's not going to soften some of these positions.
David, you know, closing thoughts here. There's also a contention that President-elect Trump may not understand just exactly how many jobs would be created, for example, if Apple moved manufacturing of the iPhone or even part of it back to the United States. We just had Alex Webb, our Bloomberg Tech reporter, on saying it actually wouldn't create that many jobs because automation is just so good now. You know, where do you see this actually going? Well,
you know, those were amazing statistics that Alex mentioned before, which I am going to really remember. It costs 75 cents an hour to have a robot do a job, $4 an hour in China, and $40 an hour in manufacturing in the U.S. Those numbers don't lie. I mean, if those are right, and they're close to right in any case, there's just no way that we can bring a lot of manufacturing back without either not creating jobs or dramatically increasing consumer costs. You know, if people want things to cost more when they go to Walmart, fine, bring some of those jobs back and create a bunch of manufacturing jobs in the United States. I don't really see how this is going to play out. It's one of so many things that, as I said earlier in the show, is pretty darn hard to predict right now. With the Trump's rhetoric seems to be directly contrary to logic.